Welcome in everyone to a very special episode of American Joyride. I am joined today by Errol Doebler. He is a former Navy SEAL and FBI agent, and now he is a leadership coach. We're going to get into all that and much, much more in today's episode. Errol, thank you very much for being here.
I appreciate it, David. I'm excited to be here and excited to get going. Let's have a good conversation and entertain people.
Well, let's not waste any time. How'd you find yourself in the Navy SEALs?
You know, it's one of the things that you left out on my background is I was a surface warfare officer first, meaning I was a ship driver. So I went to the Naval Academy and they, you go into this thing called service selection and you get up, look on the board and what's available, and you pick your vocation for the next, minimum 5 years of your life. And there's some things you got to qualify for, and there's limited number of billets, and they went on class rank. And, I'm over the fact that I wasn't a very good or conscientious student. I try to pass those lessons on to my children. It's important. My class rank was terrible. So by the time I got up to the board, there wasn't much left, and they were all chips, and I just didn't want to be on a ship. And a guy came up to me, a senior officer, a captain. Yeah, what's wrong, son? And I told him. He goes, okay. He goes, that's the ship you want to be on. And I go, why do I want to be that ship? It was the USS Monongahela. It's an oiler. And he goes, because they're out to sea all the time. And I said, you didn't just hear me. He said, I don't want to be out to sea on a ship. He goes, no, you want to be a Navy SEAL. I go, right. He goes, the only way to be a Navy SEAL is to get on that ship and do a great job, be out to sea, get your qualifications before anybody, because you're going to have to do something to stand out, because they're only going to take now one person from the fleet every year. So that was the best advice I ever got. So I did that. And, there was, 30 guys from the fleet officers for one spot to a BUDS class that year. And I got lucky. I got it. And so that's how I ended up in the SEAL teams, long and short of it.
So what's the transition like being a surface warfare officer? One of my best friends is a surface warfare officer.
Okay.
What's the transition like from that to now being in essentially what's a direct action combat role if you were to deploy?
Yeah, it was a big transition, but it was a transition that was easy for me because that's where I wanted to be, right? It didn't require any thought. But that said, it brought me more credibility than I had anticipated. Rolling into BUDS training, having, that surface warfare officer qualification pin, I got a lot of respect for that because they're like, that's brutal. I'm like, yeah, it is brutal. So it gave me, the transition was made easier because I had already had good experience leading young people, right, for those couple of years. So I wasn't testing things out as a new Navy SEAL officer from a leadership perspective. I was pretty good shape. Now, the fact that the missions are completely different, there was no transition for me. I was able to forget what I did on the ship very quickly, aside from the leadership lessons I learned, and move into, okay, now here's where I really wanted to be all along anyway. So that part of the transition was pretty easy.
Well, BUDS is notorious for being one of, if not the most difficult military selection processes. And I'm curious for you, did it live up to the hype? Were you physically ready? Was it as hard as you thought? Was it easier than you thought? And as an officer, because I got to imagine there's way fewer officer slots, do they hone in on you more just because it's so much more selective for fewer spots?
Yeah, so it's one of the few things in the world, and I've done some pretty cool things in my life, right? I've got a nice bank of stories to tell and give reflection on. It's the one thing that I tell people, it's harder than it looks. There's just no other way to describe it. What you see on the TV, and I think it's cool that they've got all this stuff on BUDS out there, and is it really that hard? It's harder because it's hard to look at it. It was harder. And, I was ready. Physically, everybody there is a stud, right? Think about all your CrossFit. We had 200 people starting our class. They were probably the 200 most fittest people in the world. So that's never the issue. it's always the mindset. And there's a lot, there was a lot that went into that. And that kind of goes into the next part of your question. Is it harder on officers? Yes and no. Everybody goes through the exact same thing, right? That's what makes this a unique training, side by side with your enlisted counterparts. However, to a degree, being an officer was harder because if something went wrong, they didn't go after the E2 who, has been in the Navy for a month. Right. They went after the officer. This is your fault, sir. This is your fault. This went wrong because of you. Always. And that made it harder because you look and go, well, I didn't even know that was happening. Or how is that my fault? And you had to start paying attention. Okay, apparently everything's my fault. And then you became a better leader. What's going on? Give me an update, all that stuff. So from that standpoint, it was harder. And they truly expected more of you. And it was a beautiful thing from my perspective on how they did that. And it really, and it also, the enlisted guys, they took mercy on you, right? As an officer, they're like, eventually, if you did your job well enough, they'd be like, look, we got to hook him up. He's getting killed because we're screwing this stuff up. He's the one getting beat down, right? So then all of a sudden it comes together, right? So from that standpoint, the physical preparation was not that difficult. The physical exertion was challenging, but it was always the mental, right? The day after day, not the day after day, the hour after hour after hour of just knowing the next thing you're going to do is going to be every bit as hard as the last thing you did. Do I have the mental and emotional capacity to get through that?
You just said something that I hadn't even considered when you said that, they'd say, sir, it's your fault. Are your instructors at BUD/S, they're not officers, so you technically outrank the guys who are running you into the ground, and they probably don't give a damn one bit.
No, they don't care. The beauty of it is, now there are officers at BUD/S training, and they'll make an appearance once in a while, but that's not their job. They'll come out, right, and they'll give you a little, lastly a little bit, but they're overseeing the whole thing. The enlisted guys, they know the importance of good officer work, so they're coming from experience. They've had bad officers, and they'll say, and I know for a fact, each one of them has said, I went to BUD/S to make sure if I have something to say about it, there's no bad officers because you guys are the ones making the decisions. So no, they are absolutely allowed to be disrespectful. They throw a sir on everything, okay, just to maintain some military decorum. But no, the idea that you are the most screwed up person I've ever seen, sir, okay, it's just the way it goes.
I love that. That's absolutely fascinating. When you
and just the other part of your question, I'm sorry, David, but there are far fewer slots for officers. So the attrition rate overall is still, I think, 70%, right? 7 out of 10 people will quit. The attrition rate for officers is very low. And I think it's probably because we've got a little more experience, maybe a little more maturity, right? We went to college where some of these guys are coming in, they're only 18. We're, 21, 22, 23. It's a little bit. But then the course is much more selective, right? You really have to do something different to be an officer and get selected for BUD/S. So from that standpoint, it is much harder to get into, and the attrition rate is very low for the officers.
How proud were you of the day when you passed BUD/S, or because there's another part? Were you technically a Navy SEAL the day you passed BUD/S, or there's another training after the fact, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll never forget graduation day. It was the greatest day of my life. But they do a good job because there's a week. BUD/S technically ends, let's just say last week. You come back from phase 3, right, on Friday. Graduation is the next Friday. You know what I mean? So there's a week of kind of celebration, like I did it. They're not messing with us. But that said, that day of graduation, I'll never forget it. And are you a SEAL? I don't know. Technically not. You're not really a SEAL until you get your trident, right? But you are assigned to a SEAL team. You are assigned to they've restructured things for the better. the way it used to be when I was in was you graduated buds, you went to jump school first. That was the first thing everybody did. And then you went to your team and you got assigned a platoon. And, as soon as it was available. And then internally, they did the test to see if you get your trident, right? So they had their own process set up and it was just always different. And they were like, okay, you're ready to have your trident. And then they give you your trident. They've standardized it now. I think everybody now once they graduate buds, they go to SEAL tactical training or whatever it is. And then everybody goes through that together. And then at the end of that, you get your trident, right? So they test you on all the qualifications, which is a better way to do it. Then you're a SEAL. You get your trident.
I know you suffered a very significant injury during your time in the Navy. Can you talk about how that changed you and what the road to recovery, what you learned about yourself?
Yeah. So I was in the SEAL teams in the late 1990s, and there wasn't a whole lot of work going around in the 90s. And by work, the only thing that matters to a SEAL is combat. So I suffered two major head injuries. The first one was during a training exercise, military operations in an urban terrain, mountain training. It's just what you saw on TV in Iraq, going from house to house to house. And so it was at night. And remember, back then, walking around with night vision goggles and the laser scopes didn't exist. You had iron sights and you had a flashlight mounted on your weapon. And when you wanted to see, you hit the flashlight, right? So we were going in through a door and I was the number 2 man in the door. And the first guy jumped really aggressively to the right. And I remember thinking, well, that's weird. That's not a standard flow movement that we do. And I understood very quickly why he did that, right? I went the opposite way he did. And there was no floor on the other side of the door. So I took a full story, whatever that is, 10 or 12 feet onto the concrete, wham, right on my head. Now, back in those days, again, head injuries and injuries in general were handled a little differently, for better, for worse, probably for worse. It was kind of hey, Errol, your skull is showing. What do you want to do? And I was like, well, let's just clean it up. Let's finish the training. We'll get to the local hospital. We'll get some stitches and move back to work. That's the way it is. That's the way it was. It turns out that a couple of weeks later, I had this terrible incident where I was immobile because the pain was so bad in my head. Nobody could figure out what was wrong. They did multiple spinal taps on me over the course of a week. What we know now was my brain was swelling and bleeding and coming down into my spine. Once I had a clean spinal tap, I was in the hospital for a week. They discharged me. Command called. I'm like, hey, you ready to come back to work on Monday? I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. You know what I mean? It was different. The next injury was we were on deployment and we got tasked with an operation. And it was what's called a visit board search and seizure, right? A ship takedown, classic Navy SEAL operation. Absolutely nobody in the world does it better than we do. And we had a 24-hour, it was in 48 hours. So we had a day to rehearse. And did you ever watch Seinfeld? You never watched the show Seinfeld? Well, there's a very funny, epic line from this character, George. And he says, the sea was angry that day, my friend, like an old man trying to deliver, return soup at a deli. And the sea was angry that day. We were over there looking, me and my platoon, and when a bunch of SEALs look at the water and go, I don't know if we can do our operation, that says a lot about how bad the sea state was. And I said, well, okay, look, we've rolled it over and up. Let's rehearse. The long and short of it, I could go through an hour and rivet you with all the details because it's a fun story. The bottom line is it was a 30-foot climb from our fast boats up to the top of the boat that was going to take over. And this is rehearsal. And the ladder ended up getting hard pointed at both ends. And so the sea state was so big that when it went down to the crest of the wave, the trough of the wave, the ladder exploded. And I took a 30-foot header into the boat. So that I got medically discharged after that, but not because of my head injuries, but because of my arm, like my ulnar nerve got shattered, right? So I didn't have use of my hand and they didn't know if I'd get it back. So, I got discharged. But what I kept telling them was, I almost don't care about my hand. I'm like, these headaches, they won't stop. And they're like, oh, I don't know. Well, it was only a couple of years ago, I finally got diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. And so I went through 20 plus years suffering the effects of this injury. And what I know, and I didn't know it at the time, right? So what I know now was the doctor told me based on the scans, he said, look, the part of your brain that's responsible for regulating your emotional response is dormant. It's not working. That's how bad your injury was. And he was like, you really should not be a productive member of society. And in all likelihood, you could have been one of those 22 veterans a day that's committed suicide, because how did you do this? How did you survive? And we'll get into my leadership practice and all that, but it was essentially this leadership practice that I developed, part and parcel, to survive these situations that I would find myself in. And how do I get through them without being overly emotional? And how do I kind of reset my nervous system and all these things? So I went through 25 years of just absolute struggle on processing emotions. And I know towards the end, I was getting progressively worse, because my wife said things started to change. Like, you just started to be different. And I got this treatment. It's a non-pharmaceutical treatment that my mission now is to make this the go-to treatment for all brain injuries. It's not FDA approved yet. I'm working on helping the researchers get funding, but it's disgusting that there is a cure out there for this traumatic brain injury that is essentially insulin to create energy in your brain. And we're still giving our veterans, and really quite anybody who's had a head injury, all these pharmaceuticals, and the effects of these pharmaceuticals are making things worse for them, not better. So I've kind of gone off track a little bit, but those were my injuries, and that's what I went through until just recently, until the last couple of years, where my brain is healed.
Well, number one, we're not going off track at all. That's fascinating you bring that up, because I've interviewed, and I know outside of those privately, guys who've had really bad TBI, really bad PTSD, and there's some non-FDA approved treatments that they've sought, and they said it stopped them from killing themselves. Two different guys, I won't get into specifics, sought treatment that I guess would be considered non-traditional. Both of them were suicidal. Both of them now are like different humans in a better way. And they said that those treatments, the exact quote was, I was circling the drain, ready to go.
We all are. We all were. Now they probably went to ketamine or some type of hallucinogenic. And that's all good, right? Because I'm hearing good things about it. That stuff's not for me. I have a pretty addictive personality, and I was like, I'm not doing that. And so again, this thing was just essentially insulin dripped into the nose, went past the blood-brain barrier, goes into the brain, creates energy. Simple as that. No pharmaceuticals, no side effects, just energy to the brain. And I know the guys, and people don't even know about this. And I promise you, people are going to know in the next year or two. And you'll be like, oh, I heard that guy Errol on David's podcast, and he said this was going to be it. It is going to be it. I promise. I will not die until the day this becomes it.
I can see how fired up and passionate you are about it. We can get into that more as we continue into your leadership stuff. But before we do that, the main reason I was so excited to have you on, I was so excited when you said yes, is because you took a little bit of time out of government service when you left the Navy, and then you end up in the FBI. So you're a former Navy SEAL. You end up in the FBI shortly after, about 2 years after 9/11, right?
Yeah, 2003 is when I joined the FBI.
And what role did 9/11 play in that decision? And do you remember where you were when the towers got hit?
Yeah, I do. It was the only reason I went back in. So 9/11 happened, and of course, my first call was to the SEAL teams. And they laughed. They're like, well, first of all, Errol, everybody's called. They said, and we're going to take people back. But they said, Errol, you got medically discharged. You got to figure that out, because we can't take you, right? And I was like, I know. The story of me getting medical clearance is, again, another really fun story. And that if the medical community heard it, They will hear it. I don't care if they hear it now. They'll be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he did that." Now, I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't forge anything. Don't. All right. But anyway, I got medically cleared. So when that happened, I said, all right, the SEAL teams, they're good. You're good. And I'm not going to get the action I need anyway, or I want there. So I said, I'm going to just apply for the FBI and the CIA, and whoever gets back to me first is where I'm going. And the FBI got back to me first. Now, do I remember where I was? Yeah, I was in Lower Manhattan on 9/11. I was downtown, and I had a business meeting, and, we were just watching the news, prepping for our meeting. And I was actually in a Starbucks, when the first plane hit, and somebody goes, "Oh my God, a helicopter just ran into the World Trade Center." And everybody just went out and looked and like, "Oh, I hope everybody's okay." It was just, nobody knew what the hell was going on. And then I went back to the hotel, and then, obviously more information comes out, and then the whole thing falls. And I was about a block away from the edge of the devastation. You know what I mean? So like everything happened, all the smoke and stuff like that. Where I was, we could kind of see it. It didn't reach us, but that's where we were. My brother-in-law got killed. He was up on the towers. And that just, again, I enjoyed the private sector. I was enjoying myself. But I was like, nah, this is it's time for me to get in this fight and go get some. That's what I did.
How quickly did you realize on 9/11, like, this is not an accident? Because you have a Navy background, you have training the average human can't comprehend. Did you know pretty quickly that there's no way this is an accident?
And it was, yeah, it was obvious once somebody said it was an airplane, big airplane. Like, that's, again, I don't know. For me, it was common sense. I don't know where everybody else was on that, and they still thought it was an accident. Once it wasn't a helicopter that flew in, and you don't comprehend those things. Like, what is that? Helicopter did what? Didn't they see it? And then you're focused on the day, and then you look at the news, like, okay, this is bad. Something's going on here. And then, of course, the next plane comes in, and now everybody's figuring it out. Yeah, it didn't take that long.
And so you use that's the spark that then drives you into your next career phase in the FBI. When you get to the FBI, do you tell them straight up, put me in a role that is going to get me as close to catching or killing bad guys as you possibly can?
I did. Not everybody does. What they do is the FBI, I loved being an FBI agent, but I left because the culture, they've just got some work to do. And kind of what they're getting beat up a little bit these days. I can just tell you, and I don't say this with pride, they've earned it. That said, the actual work in an FBI agent is fantastic. And so what happens is when you're at the FBI Academy, there's this day where it's like almost like a lottery. They tell you where you're going. Hey, you're going to New York, you're going to Texas, whatever it is. They tell you your office, and it's early. And I knew I was going to New York, just because that was one of my top picks. I wanted to be in DC, but once I put New York like second, anybody who wants to go to New York gets to go to New York. But the reason was, Marshall, I bet I know that's going to be most of the action. And then when I got New York, I specifically went to our class supervisor, and I said, "Can you please reach out to whoever handles the terrorism squad that covers Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the former Soviet republics, and please ask them if I can join them." And he's like, "Well, that's not how it works." I go, I know, but can you do it anyway? And he goes, "Okay." And he came back to me like 2 days later. He goes, "You're assigned to the Afghanistan, Pakistan, former Soviet republic squad. Good luck." I was like, "Cool." So yeah, I did. I reached out and said, that's where I want to be. And I got there.
And so so this is 2003, you're a couple of years in. What's your day-to-day job look like as an FBI agent assigned to that region, working out of the New York office?
Yeah. So the FBI went through, This was new, right? Obviously. And while they had a terrorism arm that did really do some good work, the whole model needed to change. And so I was at the beginning of that model. So there was a lot of flexibility, right? And I'm a pretty creative guy. That SEALs are just creative guys. So, for me, and I listened to the old agents, and they would say time and again, great cases mean great sources, get sources. So all I did, I immersed myself in the community and finding where can I find an angle and who is that person? And I just went crazy trying to find sources. And I started finding really good sources early that were able to make some really good terrorism cases. Now, a good source comes with a lot of problems. They're a good source because they're generally mixed up in some dirty shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but that's the only way to say it. Yeah, right. So it takes a lot of work, and then while the FBI will say sources, all of a sudden you bring in somebody who's got some real dirt. They're like, well, we can't trust them. I'm like, you have to trust me, right? To handle them and to be able to distinguish and vet out what's accurate information and, what's not. And you have to trust me to lead this person to make sure they're a good source. And, the FBI can be very risk averse. They don't like that. And so I had to use a lot of times the power of my personality to convince people, you have to let me go do my thing. Sometimes it rubbed people the wrong way and sometimes it didn't. But that's where I was. That's what my day-to-day was. And then once you get an established source, now it's identifying a network. And once it's identifying a network, it's infiltrating that network. And then once it's infiltrating that network, it is finding out if there's an active plot or if they have ties overseas that we can leverage somehow and disrupt what's happening. That was it.
Just for pure curiosity, what's the threshold like? So you're an FBI agent, you're in New York. You think you have credible evidence of an imminent situation or something that's in the works. Is there going to be an FBI SWAT team that takes that person down immediately? Is there going to be long surveillance on them? Like, where's the threshold for we got to act sooner than later?
Yeah, it depends. It depends. It depends. And so what does that mean? If I uncover plot through my investigative work, that means I've got a source in there, or we've got some electronic intelligence going, right? We've got a wire up, right? Everybody knows what that is. You can then assess, like, okay, we can play this out a little bit. We can see, right? We have now control over it. But if that's the case, then you know what the plan is. Okay. And you say, okay, they're still in the early stages. Let's play this out. Let's see who else is involved. Let's see where they're right. So you can, in that case, you've identified something, but you've got some time to contain it, but then to also really gather some intelligence for maybe a bigger thing going on. So that's one area. Now, I met my wife in the FBI. She was an analyst, and she was the best analyst, not in the FBI, in all the intelligence community. And that's a fact, because people from every other intelligence organization would eventually reach out to her for information on certain programs that she was working. And there was one incident where we got intelligence that a car bomb is being driven in this area to go to New York City. That is happening now. That is truly where there is the ultimate competitiveness among law enforcement agencies, right? In this case, the FBI and the NYPD. Who's getting there first? But in that case, it does not matter. It's everybody's getting there to stop it. So that is an example of this is happening now. All hands on deck, start making calls, but that thing needs to be stopped, right? So that's another extreme example. And my wife, there was a few of those when I was in. And, the public, it's good that they didn't know about a lot of that stuff. But my wife she was the lead analyst on a lot of those right out of the gate. So, yeah. So again, it depends.
I actually had the follow-up question, and I'm just going to ask it now. I had it lower on the list. It goes with the public. Some of the guys I interview from like DevGru or Delta, they'll say, there's a lot of close calls that the U.S. public has no idea even occurred, or there's a lot of stuff that happened that the U.S. public has no idea like how close things were. From your experience as an FBI agent, are there way closer calls domestically than the U.S. public? Like, is that a regular thing and everyone just lives in ignorance?
Well, I just told you there were several,
Right.
Things where they had to be like, this needs to stop now because this is on. You know, I think those things get publicized, now that I'm thinking about it, and they should get publicized. It's more the long stuff. Like, we disrupted something and it was going to happen and they were really making a plan. And then we just said, okay, it's good. We are comfortable with the amount of intelligence we've gathered. Let's break this up. Let's recruit them, right? Let's get them on our side. So now they're making a deal. We're keeping that hush hush because we don't want. So there are a lot of things that the public doesn't know about. And is it good that they're living in ignorance? To some degree it is. But, when they started, and this is not a shot at anybody from a political standpoint, but when the Obama administration came in, they started to undo a lot of the things that we were doing. I think some of it was okay, but this notion that people were being targeted and singled out, right? Oh, you're unfairly targeting the Islamic community. Well, what I would tell people, because I worked it, right? I would say, no, we are targeting the Islamic community. That's exactly what we're doing. We're not arresting people because they practice Islam,
Right.
but that is the group that is presenting this threat. Just like when I worked Russian organized crime, we targeted Russians. Okay, just like when you work Bloods and Crips, you target Bloods and Crips. It's all targeting. Okay, you have to target a community, and then you have to infiltrate that community, and then find where the threats are inside of that group. My point is a larger point. It got a little harder, again, when the Obama administration came in, because there was this narrative that groups were being unfairly targeted. Nobody was being unfairly targeted, right? It was an imminent threat in many cases. So yeah, maybe you went into a community a little rougher than you normally would have, but all you were doing was trying to get information, establish relationships with people to get you to help to find the bad people inside that community. And that said, the Muslim community did that. Right? We went into the Muslim community, and the large majority of them were like, how can I help? Because this is no good for us. Right. So you go into, Bloods and Crips are black gangs. You go into a black neighborhood, they want to help. They're like, no, they're killing our community. How can I help? So this notion that there is this unfair targeting going on, no, there's not. People in that community want it. It's a political narrative that happens sometimes, and it's a shame. So I'm not even sure what question I was answering. But, that's my answer.
We're talking close calls. Now, I want to get into how you deployed overseas as an FBI agent, because I've heard those stories before, but I have a feeling a lot of the audience they probably didn't even know that was a thing. So you're attached to the Rangers, and the big things I want to kind of piece out first is, did you have to go through new tactical training because now you're going to a war zone? Yeah, you were a Navy SEAL. That was in the 90s. Now it's 2010. What type of train up do you do to go over to war as an FBI agent?
Yeah. So let me give you the backdrop on how this happened. So our special operations units, right? The SEALs, Delta, Green Berets, Rangers, were doing a great job of smashing targets, right? They're just doing a great job of smashing targets. What they weren't doing a great job of, though, was collecting intelligence, right? And, they made their adjustments. And then it was, well, what other adjustment can we make? Who's good at establishing rapport with an adversary quickly and gaining actionable intelligence? Well, a good FBI agent is really good at that, right? Because that's what we do. We establish rapport with bad guys. We try to get them on our side, and then we get actionable intelligence. So what they did, they started a program, and it was with the hostage rescue team initially, right? So those guys are 100% a combat unit, okay? And they said, okay, we'll go in because we're FBI agents first. So we still have that skill set. We still have the skill set on how to properly search a location that's organized, and then how to bring it back to locations, separate it out, or, all the organizational stuff that FBI agents do on a regular basis. And then they were up to speed currently on combat and tactics. So they were the initial ones who went in. Well, the program got so popular, like the special operations community was like, this is fantastic. We need more. Well, they were getting burned out. So then they went to the SWAT teams and said, we need people who are current on tactics and, who can volunteer. And that vetting process was stringent, right? So somebody like me who worked terrorism, so I knew the landscape and was a Navy SEAL and was a SWAT operator. So Errol, they come in, and then it was I can't remember, a month or two, but it was intensive training. Like, it was as good as training as I've ever been to, because they had all been over, HRT put it on. They'd all been over there. They knew what to see. They knew what to train us on. And by the time we got to that unit, we were locked in. We were as good at combat and up to speed as anybody else. And then we did our job better than anybody. So that's the backdrop of how that worked out. So it was very selective.
Were you excited to get over there and get to be right in the action, be right in the middle of it in the war on terror? You didn't get to, obviously you were out of the SEALs before the war on terror started, but now, like, this is it. You're an FBI agent, but, like, you're going. Were you pumped?
Pumped. I couldn't get there soon enough. I remember telling my friend, after 9/11, and it looked like I was joining the FBI, I said, I don't know how I'm doing it. I will be over there someday, and I will be getting after people. And he didn't. He's like, oh, if you say so, but I don't think that's what the FBI does, Errol. So when I told him when I got back, he's like, Errol, so this was 2010. He goes, you said it. You said you were getting over there and you were going to get after people, and you did. That is unbelievable. Right? So that was my intention all along. I didn't know how it was going to look. But I said, there is going to come a day where I will be carrying my weapon and I will be over there in the middle of it, and I'll be getting mine. And I did.
And do they kit you up just like you're an Army Ranger or a Green Beret? Like, you've got the full night vision, you got an M4 body. So if someone just saw a photo of, like, the team, they would have no idea that you were an FBI agent.
No, except that we wore our beards and stuff like that, just to kind of, was it necessary? No. I guess the technical reason behind that is, if you're operating in a special unit, there's always a possibility you can get separated, because you're going into the Badlands, right? You're going directly there. So that gives you a little bit of, like, all right, if you're on, escape and evasion, and somebody takes a quick look, you've got a big bushy beard, maybe they won't look at you twice. But for us, it was good to separate what we looked like. So once we got on target, they handed the target over to us. Like, okay, they'd call us Fox Bravo. All right, Fox Bravo, the target's yours. And our job would then to be separate, interview, fingerprints, and who are we taking with us? And it just was always a little bit different when they looked at you and you had this big bushy beard and everybody else didn't. Like, why are you different? So it was more of a psychological thing as well. But aside from that, we had state-of-the-art gear. And it was issued to us, and all state-of-the-art.
Well, it's amazing you're seeing so many things from the FBI perspective that mesh almost identical to what I've heard from guys in the military in those exact situations. And with the beard and tattoos, one guy said when they would look at me, guys they were taken into custody, and they'd say, we've seen plenty of American soldiers and they're tatted up and they've got big beards, and they'd say, yeah, but you ain't ever seen any that look like us before.
Yeah, you haven't seen me.
And they said that played huge mind games with those dudes. So whose authority are you under? Because you're an FBI agent. Are you listening to whoever the highest ranking ranger is on target, or who's your boss on target when bullets are flying?
The company commander. The company commander on site. The FBI did a pretty good job weirdly, they did a good job of staying out of our way, right? So HRT, we had several bosses, technically. HRT, that was their program. So we reported back to them regularly with our daily reports. And there's some ancillary FBI units that wanted to claim some responsibility, so you had to check in with them once in a while. But it was mostly HRT. But then from a pure tactical standpoint, we answer to the company commander on the ground.
The first time you hit a target, or the first time you were in a situation where it was starting to get real dicey, real hairy, what emotions are going through your head, realizing like this ain't training anymore? Like people are out here getting shot.
Yeah, it happened pretty quickly. So our deployment, as far as deployment went, was great. We saw so much action, and we didn't lose a single person. It was fantastic from that standpoint. Now, that said, about once a week, we'd have to have a memorial for another Ranger unit where a couple guys got killed. But yeah, to answer your question, how do you describe it? You're ready, right? And you're just ready. And as a matter of fact, you're itching. Let's get it, right? Because that's what you're there for. But the realization for me personally hit in the helicopter on the first mission, and they're obviously all at night, and just looking over the mountains of Afghanistan and being like, holy crap, I'm here. This is actually happening. And then you start thinking, wait, holy crap, who's in the mountains? Are they got a stinger ready to hit us? Then you start getting to operational mode. And it's funny, it's the first time, our first operation, we jumped out of the helicopter and you set your perimeter. Well, I tripped and I did a somersault. My night vision came off, and I'm like, are you kidding me? This is how I'm starting, but it was just like anything else. Like, just relax, take a breath, get your night vision back on, because you've practiced this. You've practiced this falling off and getting it on at night. So it was funny because I had a giggle at myself. But then, once you're going, the first time the firefight started for me, I had a mix of emotions, right? There was that exhilaration, that adrenaline rush, like, okay, let's go. And then there was the obvious fear, like, ooh, okay, this is real, right? Those sound effects that the movies have, like bing, bing, those are real. Whoever put that into play, and I said, I'm like, oh my God, it really sounds like that. So there's a lot that goes through your head. And that all happens split second, because then you are locked into what your job is and where everybody else is. And then you are truly you go to what you know in times of stress. And in this case, you know your training. You lock in very quickly.
That's absolutely mind-boggling to me. As a former Navy SEAL, what was your impression of Army Rangers?
Loved them. It's a different group, and I'm glad they got to the Tier 1 status because they deserve it. But it's very much more of a traditional military Army atmosphere, right? In the SEAL teams, it's very casual, almost to its detriment at certain times. Here, it was still, yes, Sergeant, no, Sergeant, yes, sir, no, sir, right? Lots of that formality, but highly trained, just hard as nails and ready to get it done and respectful. So the atmosphere, the culture was a little different. It was a little more military than I was used to coming out of the SEAL teams. And then even, you know, HRT, right? Because we did a lot of training with them. It's all a little more informal, professional, but informal. The Rangers, they maintained that very military bearing, no beards, haircut short, you know, the whole thing.
This is blowing me away. Just the impression you have is a guy that was an FBI agent. Now you're in Afghanistan. Do you miss it ever? Do you miss, like, are there days where you think to yourself, man, I wish I could be on one more target in Afghanistan?
So it's funny you say that. So I was engaged before I went. I had just gotten engaged. And my father-in-law, we were sitting around having drinks, before I left. And, he goes, I'm not sure why you're doing this. So he's like, you're about to get married. And so we talked through it, and I said, look, Steve, if you're looking to talk me out of it, it's not going to happen, but I do hear you. He goes, well, make me a promise. I said, okay, if I can. He said, make this the first and last. And I said, all right, deal. Because I could have spent years over there. I loved it. I loved it. I would have asked to have gone back. I would have done all that stuff, but I made a promise, and it was a good promise, right? It wasn't, I don't look back and go, I wish I didn't make that promise. It was a good promise. It was the right promise to make. And I'm glad that I did. But from that other side of who I am, I loved it. I loved it.
I can tell. I can tell you there's no point even trying to hide. I can see the shirt on your face right now. Last question on this, and I want to get into your leadership stuff. The year you gave was 2010, so we're shortly before the raid that kills Osama bin Laden, probably within a year of it or so. And you were working in the FBI terror unit that covers Afghanistan, Pakistan. Did you at that time, was there any knowledge to you or anybody you were working with as to where bin Laden was at all, or at that kind of like priorities had shifted? You guys were looking at other things, or was there any sense?
No, not for the circles that I ran with. First of all, he wasn't in my sphere of influence, if you will. There was a group that covered Al Qaeda. I didn't. So my groups were, the groups I covered were kind of like Al Qaeda's hitmen. You know what I mean? They did all the dirty work. So there was an FBI group that was specifically assigned to Al Qaeda. What they knew about bin Laden, or if they had just moved on to something else, I don't know. I worked very close with the CIA, but again, my thing wasn't bin Laden or Al Qaeda, so I never really concerned myself with it. My sense is, no, nobody knew from the FBI, but I could be wrong.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I want to now get into leadership. Leadership is a big thing with you. You can go to your Instagram page, and it becomes very obvious that is kind of one of your ethos, if you will. In your opinion, very bluntly, what's the difference between a great leader and an absolute piece of garbage leader?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. But I think if I had to break it down just to a couple of things, there's an awareness that great leaders have, an awareness of themselves, their own fallibilities, being comfortable with those fallibilities, working to improve them, right? Not letting their ego get in the way of those things, and then understanding their strengths and really working to the strengths. And then most importantly, really letting people do their job, guiding them, overseeing them, making sure they stay inside the lanes, pushing the envelope of excellence. That's what great leaders do. The shit I saw at the FBI from a leadership perspective, those people just did the opposite of those things. They had no awareness of themselves. Their ego did not match their capabilities. They didn't even know what their strengths were. They certainly weren't aware of their weaknesses, and they were risk averse. Anything that might get them looked at, sideways from a superior, They didn't want any part of it. And I just didn't do well under those people. I just didn't do well under them. Oddly enough, I did well under the hardest leaders, right? Because they were the ones who had the high standards of, yeah, let's go get it. Let's push the envelope. Yeah, let's try that. I did great with them. It was the cowards. I tried. I would try to have them see the light. I would try to get to their level of language. I would try to understand what would stop them from doing our job, putting ourselves at risk. And then I would ultimately tell them to go fuck themselves. I'd get in trouble. So, that's usually the way it went down.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. I feel like, you look at people that are kind of idolized in society. I don't know if you're a sports guy or not, but like a guy like Nick Saban. Nick Saban, who coaches football at the University of Alabama, won 7 national titles. It's a hard ass. Like, he's not a nice person to his players. He demands excellence from them, and everyone praises him for that. But then if you go into the micro level of like the American workplace, like you're saying the FBI, that's not tolerated. We put it on a pedestal because he's excellent at it, and everyone says he is, and everyone agrees that works. But yet then outside of football, you can't be tough on people. Like, do you understand the point? It doesn't make sense. Why do we applaud that leadership in a game, but yet we don't like it when people are hard on each other in the workplace? That to me doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think the reason behind that is because we have a misguided notion about what being hard on people means. We have this stereotype that it's somebody yelling and screaming and belittling, and really what it means is establishing true behaviors that make up your culture, that are in context, that you truly live and hold people accountable to. Now, they'll be different for every organization, okay? But once they're established by the leader and the leader truly lives them, that's hard to do, right? That's very hard. That's being hard on people to say, hey, David, you just did this thing. Just curious. How does that fit into our culture? How is that how we do business? Because I know you know what it is, because me, the leader, established it, and we go over it all the time. So walk me through that. That's being hard on somebody. But is it really? So we have this misguided notion of what being hard on somebody is. Being hard on somebody is holding them accountable. What does that mean? That's got a negative connotation. I'm going to hold you accountable. Well, people feel like that means you're going to get me in trouble. No, it means I'm going to ask you a question. That's the definition of accountability. Account for your actions. David, why did you just do that? I just held you accountable. Do you know how hard it is to ask people that and wait for the answer? It's hard. So that's why I have a job. That's why Ice Cold Leader exists, because people recognize they don't know how to do that, right? And so we just have this misconception on what excellence means and how it's attained. The blueprint for it is very simple. Establish your behavioral guidelines, know how to make a plan and execute, and then make sure you are living those things. And then when you hold someone accountable, it's the quality of their answer that's next. Their answer, they might have a good explanation. Why did you do that? Oh, I did it because of A, B, and C. Oh, that makes sense. Cool. Or they'll give you a terrible answer. Now we move to consequence. So people get this leadership thing and being hard on each other and being tough with consequence. Consequence is after the leader's done their job of establishing what it all needs to look like, holding people to account, and then somebody just can't seem to get on board. What's the consequence? You're demoted. You're fired. You get a cut in pay, whatever it is. Okay, and we bundle it all into this one thing. It needs to be broken out into many separate things. So I don't know if that answers your question, because true excellence and being hard on people is a cultural thing. You can't do it, right? I was having trouble doing it at some points in the FBI because it was like, well, what are we doing here, right? And then all of a sudden, I found myself not a cultural fit in some areas, right? Because I was at an office after I left New York City that just didn't do business that way, right? It was shortcuts, right? It was gossip and innuendo, right? And I tried to change that in the operations that I did. And I met with brick walls. And that's when I was like, you know what? I'm not a cultural fit here anymore. I'm out. So I don't know. I can go on and on. I hope that kind of gives it some flavor for my thoughts on that.
Let's say you're the leader of a place I work or a military team, whatever it can be, and I'm the follower, I'm in the subordinate role, you're my boss. And I see you making poor decisions, whether it's professionally, personally, like you're going off the rails.
Mm-hmm.
I have an obligation as someone who's tasked with following your orders to tell you you're making some pretty dumb decisions. Like, is that an appropriate thing for someone in a subordinate role to do?
Well, like I said, I managed to find myself in a couple positions telling people what I thought, right? And so the answer is yes and no. Ken, with the leader, you can't do it with bad leaders. They're not hearing you. They're not listening. And that puts people in a very tough decision, right? So there's a difference between a bad decision and an unlawful decision. It should never be a question. If somebody gives you an unlawful order, it is your absolute obligation and duty to say something and not carry out that order, and then report that if that person is going forward with it. In my view, that's the only way. Now, a bad decision, there's not much you can do, right? I don't agree with you denying me the ability to do my operation this way. Oh, well, too bad. It's my final decision. It's not unlawful. It's just bad leadership. You know, I get that question a lot. Me as a subordinate, what can I do? My answer is you can decide if you're a cultural fit for that. You have to make a decision at some point. You have to decide, because you can't live in anger with that. You either have to say, I don't like it, but I can accept it because for whatever reason, and that's allowed. I can accept it because, you know what? I need this job more than I need to like this job. That's a real reason, and that's okay. Or you can say, no, I'm not a cultural fit, and maybe I survive and I start looking at my other options, right? So there are decisions to be made as a subordinate when you find yourself in that position.
Interesting, very interesting. I can't say personally, you know, I've been in the professional world for 8.5-ish years. I've only had one bad dust up with a superior, and we were fine 15 minutes later. It was a direct dust up. It was a bit of a vulgar dust up, but 15 minutes later, we were totally fine. You know, I just compare it to like playing a basketball game. Like, you're going to yell, like, occasionally tensions are going to boil over, but we're trying to win the game. And as long as that, to me, remains the focus, everything can be put aside as long as the objective has not changed. Speaking of objectives, and I can't wait to hear your answer on this, I personally, and I don't want to speak for every person out there, it seems like young men in America are at a crisis point. When I say young, let's say 30 to 14. So 13 to 30, teenagers, college, young professionals. Depression rates are skyrocketing. Substance abuse through the roof. Their ability to communicate with the opposite sex is the worst in recorded history. Everything seems to be going wrong for young men. And nobody seems to have any idea what we can do to get this kind of turned around. You as a veteran, someone who's been in the FBI, a leadership coach, what can we do to tell young men, like, hey, put your shoes on, everything's going to be okay, we got to get this figured out?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. And I do, so for my coaching practice, I generally start with the CEO, and they're like, this is awesome. Can your program be, cascaded down throughout my organization? The answer is, of course it can be. And then I start running in to those young men and women. The short answer, pulled my thoughts on that. First of all, this idea, let me tell you something. Be a man. Being a man is awesome. Being a man is necessary. When this toxic masculinity came out, I embraced it. You goddamn right I'm toxically masculine. I'm a man. Because men have roles in this society. Now, somebody can disagree because guess what? Women have roles in this society, very strong roles in this society. Okay? And we have decided that that doesn't exist anymore. Okay? Not for me. I don't, so, and I get it. I get how it happens. So when I'm working with a young man, I bring him through the process. And what does that mean? Okay. I start people on emotional awareness, right? Oh, Errol, toxic masculinity and emotions? Yeah. Because toxic or masculinity doesn't mean aggression. It means recognizing what you're feeling at the time and then evaluating, is this the right emotion to act on in this situation? That's what men do. Okay. We don't equate it with masculinity, but it's what men do. And I get the question a lot. Well, what is that what you did in the SEAL teams? Everybody talked about their feelings? Kind of, because here's what would happen. You'd go into a room, whether it was a planning or a debrief, and somebody starts getting, hey, that's BS, and I'm not doing this, and that's wrong. It would take about 3 seconds for somebody to go, hold on. Why don't you go ahead, take a step outside, collect yourself, and come back in when you're ready. Translation. Look at your emotion and understand that that's not the appropriate emotion for the situation. And now move into where we are. That's what men do. I teach young men to do that. And I let them know that is a quality that not a lot of people have, men or women. And to do that, you stand out. And then everything flows from that, making that behavioral decision, making that plan, and then being confident that you're doing, because you will be confident. Because you're doing it based on everything that you've recognized and that you're seeing. And all of a sudden you get that confidence to stand up and say, wait, we said we were going to do it a different way. We got to do that. Now you're a leader. So we're letting, one of the problems in my view in society today is we bundle all these issues into one thing, right? Let's look at a very controversial one, this trans issue. Somebody identifies as something and somebody is something. We're bundling this whole thing into one issue. If I went in front of somebody who was very much into the people can identify however they want, and I said, can I have a baby? The answer is obviously no. I cannot have a baby. That is one issue. Men cannot have babies. Women have babies. Now there's the other issue about where people are with their mental health. I am a woman who feels like a man, but I can have a baby. That is a separate issue altogether. But we're not breaking the issues apart. So we argue stupidly. We have a Supreme Court justice saying, I can't tell you what a man is or what a woman is. That's ridiculous. What we can say is, well, of course there's biological men and women, but there's another issue also with how people are identifying and where their mental health is and what they're thinking. So there are two issues. What's your question? So leadership is very much the same way. We tend to not break out the issue of planning and execution and then establishing behavioral guidelines and holding people to that. So once again, I'm not even sure what question I'm answering. It's, you let me riff a little bit, so I went with it.
No, it's fine. One of the things that I find really sad is you'll see videos every once in a while. There's a great example of someone on a metro car. I actually think it might have been in New York. And, there's a roving group of people terrorizing passengers. And I see a bunch of 18 to 23-year-old adult men. They're not doing anything about it. They're just letting these people get victimized. And I personally, and I'm not some big tough guy, not in the least bit, not even a little bit. But I do know that your duty as an adult male is if you see someone who's in a situation where they cannot help themselves, as an American, you should want to intervene in that. And if you can't intervene, get the police to intervene. Like, is it wrong? Am I thinking about that wrong? Like, shouldn't we demand people stand up and do something?
Well, so let's look at it this way. Right? These people who are working in the stores are getting fired for interrupting shoplifting, right? When was the last time that we had that attitude as a country? It was before 9/11. What was the order of the day if your plane got hijacked? Sit back, just give them what they want, they'll go away. Until they, did what they did. Okay, that letting bad people do what they want in the hopes that it will all go away will never work. It will never work. I would like to think as a man, right, that I would step in those instances. But look what happened to that poor guy on the subway, right, in New York. He killed a guy. He put him in a chokehold. Now, what we don't know is what was the physical state of that person who got killed. Were they all amped up on drugs, right? So was their physiology so weak and wrapped up the second they got, chokehold, they died? That happens. We're not hearing that. Now, can we just kill people who are hurting other people? No, but what we've done is we've moved the needle way too far. And so I know from my standpoint, I think it's wrong. And my question is, who are these cowards with the phone filming it all while it's happening? Those are the people I want to see. I can almost see the people who are like, I'm not capable of this. This is not who I am. I just have to sit here and mind my own business. I get it, right? You are who you are, and it just may not be in your wheelhouse. But the fools taking the videos, like those are the ones I want to smash, So I think we've gone in the wrong direction, and I can tell you it will not get better. Bad people do not say, oh, good, I'll just stop here. No, they're like, okay, what else? What else can I get? And that's what happens.
Exactly. I got one more question for you, Errol. This has been an absolutely mind-blowing interview. I've been hanging on to every word.
Yeah,
this one's going to go back kind of to the military stuff. There's a huge debate right now in the Tier 1 community, the leadership at DevGru and over at CAG/Delta, about whether or not it's appropriate for former operators to discuss what they did when they were at the Tier 1 level. I don't know if you're watching the news. The Bin Laden raid's back in the news, not for good reasons, I would add. And it's caused huge issues behind the scenes. You're a former Navy SEAL. You have probably a unique outlook on this. Do you think guys who operated at that Tier 1 level is, obviously not releasing classified information, but is it okay for them to publicly talk about what they went through, talk about their trauma, whatever it might be, or should they do what the command says and, keep your mouth shut forever?
Well, it's a multifaceted answer. So, but first of all, I'm not familiar with what's happening in the news about the Bin Laden raid. Could you give me a thumbnail or?
Yeah, well, I know some of the people involved. So there's been evidence presented that the government's version of what happened and the version that has been publicly told is less than accurate. Let's put it that way. And the information was presented by guys on the raid. And that came on the tail end. It was given to someone else who presented it, who was a former Tier 1 guy himself. And that was the last thing in a long line of Tier 1 issues with guys doing interviews. And it's caused a lot of issues behind closed doors.
Yeah, I think so. My take on this is there's a couple places. First of all, as an active duty member, no, you keep your mouth shut, do your job. So if there's anybody giving interviews while they're still active duty or doing that stuff, no, 100%. We like to call ourselves quiet professionals. And then the question I get is, well, Errol, are you quiet because you're talking about all this stuff? Nobody said silent professional. Quiet professional. So what do I do? Well, the experiences that people like me went through, there's a lot of value for people to learn from that. Am I supposed to not leverage what I've done and the hard work I've done to make a living? I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that's fair to say to somebody, you can't share your experience that will help organizations or people, individuals, to get through hard situations. I think that's an invaluable tool. And I think you should be doing it. Now, it's hard to do, right? So I've only recently gotten comfortable sharing some stories because I came, right? SEAL teams, counterterrorism, FBI. Everything I ever did was classified. So now you're like, I don't know what I could say. I don't know what to say. And that's not really a quiet professional until, so I developed this process, right? And one of my clients was like, Errol, every now and then you'll bust out a story to prove, to validate your point. And he's like, I wish you would do that more because they're riveting and they do bring the points home. And at the time, my answer was, no, the process stands on its own. Just follow the process and you'll be great. And then I had to come to realize, no, people need context. People need something, right? And it's the story. I'm never totally comfortable sharing it, but I do because if I want my business, if I want to give what I have to people, sometimes it's a requirement. The humility that needs to come along with it, I think that's going to be an individual basis. I think a lot of times guys get upset because they don't like how the message is delivered. Okay? You're being too bravado. That's a personal opinion. Certainly classified information. What I also tell people is like, well, they say, well, you probably can't tell me this. I go, you don't have any idea what I'm not telling you. All you know is what I am telling you, and that's enough to get the point across. So if you're sharing classified information, you need to stop doing it. So, look, for all I know, somebody's going to watch this and go, Errol, what you just said was classified. I'm like, oh, I didn't know it. So that's my thought. To break it down, I think active duty men and women, no, you have to keep your mouth shut. That is not your place. Silent, quiet professional. To be able to share what you have to make a living and to help people, no, I think they should be able to do that. How you do it? Yeah.
And I think the second part of what you just said is the important part that I think those guys would argue about helping people. The common thing I hear is that, and when I say I hear, I'm not speaking for myself. They'll say things like, I earned the right to share what I went through. Like, I killed those people. My friends got killed. I have bad PTSD. I have bad TBI. I earned the right, wearing the flag, to tell my story as long as it's not classified information, what have you. And the counter argument is from the leadership at those two organizations is like, actually, you didn't. And if you don't listen to us, you're going to get in big trouble. So it's turned into a very bizarre thing. But I really wanted, Earl, could you tell people where they can find you if they're looking for you on Instagram and the internet?
Yeah, for sure. So we're the Ice Cold Leader, right? So it's at the Ice Cold Leader. icecoldleader.com is the website. Instagram, Facebook. We're on all the standard platforms. Then you find out about our coaching program, about our events, our open events, what we do, for clients, individuals, groups, and things like that. We produce there is nobody in the world who is doing leadership the way we're doing it. What I mean by that is we have a wellness and a process piece that we combined, and we use the wellness piece through cold exposure and things like that, again, to allow ourselves to clear the stress, the effects of stress, to think clearly, and then focus on a decision-making process. So it's very unique. It's super effective. And if you look us up, you'll see that a link to come out for our new book, to pre-order our new book, is out. Ice Cold Leader, Leading from the Inside Out. It chronicles the very exciting stories behind my head injuries. It chronicles my challenges with TBI, and then it goes through the process. And what it does do, David, is it's relatable, right? I had a problem. I had a challenge. And here's what I did to get through it. And everybody will be able to relate because everybody's got a challenge. They've got a team challenge. They've got a personal relationship challenge. They've got a security, a self-esteem challenge. This book will cover all of that. So we hope you look at that, pre-order. I think it officially launches on November 7th. So that's how you find me.
Well, Earl, I'd like to say thank you very much for doing this. And I think maybe sometime down the road, we circle back and do it again.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. When the book's a bestseller, we go and we talk about the book. Let's do that.